Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will kick off season 4 of the podcast and coverage for the 2025-26 season with the top storylines going into the season. The season is already started and is in full swing at this point. Cranberry Cup just happened last weekend. Lake Placid was a couple weeks ago. The Philadelphia Championships have happened as well. Champs Camp is currently going on in the US as I record this podcast. And so here we go, fans. I took a couple of months off this summer just to sort of recharge the batteries a little bit in anticipation of extra coverage and just extra excitement going into the season. But I'm ready to dust off my podcasting equipment and get started. So, of course, this is an Olympic season, and everything that we have seen for the last 3 years is building up to this season. Cannot imagine the pressure that these athletes feel going into the season, especially some of these athletes that are in very competitive countries or athletes that are looking to be part of the host country. And so it just brings on so much more drama, but it also brings on so much more excitement and so many more eyes than what we normally see on figure skating in an Olympic season. And I'm excited for it. So the very first thing we have to talk about is, of course, the Olympic spots. And this is going to be a conversation in every single country throughout this first half of the season. But I've isolated a few countries specifically where I think it's really going to be extremely competitive. And so I isolated Team Japan in their singles, USA really in all 4 disciplines, Team Canada, and again, all 4 disciplines really, Team Korea, the women, and then Team Italy in 3 of their disciplines are all going to be very competitive. So let's just sort of break these down one by one. So we've got Japan, which, if you look at the women at Worlds last season, we had Wakaba, we had Kaori, and we had Mona Chiba. All of those ladies finished in the top 6. 2 of them obviously were on the podium. That was Kaori and Mona Chiba. It looks like there's nothing absolutely that's going to knock off Kaori at this point going into the season outside of an injury, which would be absolutely heartbreaking. We're not even going to put that out there. She's won 3 world championships, and she's going to be the only returning Olympic medalist from the ladies. And so 100% she's on that team. The other 2 places, I think you could pencil in Mona Chiba coming in as a world medalist is definitely huge for her. She had a really good season last year as well, but we know how competitive it is in Japan. Wakaba had a really great season last year and performed well at Worlds. However, I think of the 3, she's probably the most vulnerable coming into this season. And so let's talk about some of the other contenders that would be potentially taking one of those spots. So we have to look at other competitors who have also performed at Worlds. So Hana Yoshida was at Worlds last season. She has the triple axel in her repertoire. It has not been consistent whatsoever, but it certainly helps an Olympic season. It's definitely what propelled Monica Wabi onto the Olympic team 3 years ago. It certainly could be something that helps to get her there. You've also got Rino Matsuke. She made Grand Prix final last year. She has probably the best artistry right now in women's figure skating. And you got a little peek of her programs this past weekend as well. Fantastic. She's doing a Nutcracker program for one of her programs. And so she could definitely put herself in the mix. Rinka Watanabe, another one with the triple axel in her repertoire. Again, not incredibly consistent, but we have seen her also make the world team in this Olympic cycle as well. And so we know what she is capable of. Also going to put her in that contender category as well. And we also cannot forget about Ryun Sumiyoshi, who has done a quad, not a lot, but you're looking for any kind of edge to help you get onto that team. She has been very consistent in her outings lots of Grand Prix medals in the last couple of seasons. She's probably going to need to win a Grand Prix, which I think is going to be a difficult task for her. So for me, she's more on the outside looking in, but she's definitely somebody to look out for. They do have one junior skater that I would definitely put into that arena, and that is Amy Nakai. She is someone who is armed with triple axel. We've seen her do triple axel, triple toes in juniors. What does she look like in her senior debut? Could really throw a wrench into things for everybody involved. So if you look at the Ultra C elements specifically for Team Japan, you've got potential from Wakaba if that's something that she's training and plans on bringing back. You've got Rinka, you've got Ryun Sumiyoshi, you've got Amy Nakai. All of those ladies have that ability to sort of get that extra spark to try to make the Olympic team for Team Japan. I think someone like Yuna Aoki really has a much harder uphill battle to get on the Olympic team. She just has one Grand Prix assignment. Obviously, things can happen and she could get a second one at some point. There's quite a few other people that are ahead of her in that instance. But I think it will be a much, much tougher battle for her to make the Olympic team. But you can sort of throw her in there as a bit of a long shot. Let's talk about the men, because there's been a lot of fluctuation for the men's team in this Olympic quad. Obviously, Yuma Kageyama is going to be on that team. There's no way, again, outside of something like an injury, again, don't want to put that out there, that he's not on the Olympic team. He is the reigning Olympic silver medalist coming back, and he has also medaled in the last two World Championships. The other two spots, though, could be a lot more interesting. Going into the beginning of last season, I would have said 100% Kalmura is on that team, and he didn't even make the world team last year. I did not feel like that was the right decision that Team Japan made, but we know that he was dealing with a lot of injury last year, particularly with his hip being problematic. I hope he's healthy coming into the season. He certainly has the most potential of any of the other Japanese men, but really, the injury really impacted his consistency last year. What does he look like this season? We have Sota Yamamoto, who has been really at the top of his game at some points, but has really not been in the mix at other points. And so consistency has really not been his friend. He's won Grand Prix. He has been at Grand Prix final. He has medaled at Grand Prix final. Can he find that form that he had a couple of seasons ago that allowed him to get to the World Championships? We've got Kazuki Tomono, who is always in the mix, but the quad really have let him down at times, especially in the beginning of the season. I feel like Kazuki oftentimes peaks towards the end of the season, by the time Four Continents rolls around, by the time Worlds rolls around, but he's missed the world team at that point. It would be too late to make the Olympic team at that point. He's got to show a lot more consistency earlier in the season than we're used to seeing from him if he is going to make this team this year. Shun Sato had a fantastic season last year. He looks to me to be the other person that I would put as the closest to a guarantee to Yuma at this point. I think it would be really hard to come up with three Japanese men, and it does not include Shun Sato. Obviously, ice is slippery. Anything could happen, and he could regress. But the way that he has progressed in this entire Olympic cycle, I expect for this season to be even better than what we have seen from him last season, which was really strong and the best that we'd seen him in his career. So in my opinion, for Team Japan, we're looking at really one spot on the men, as I feel pretty confident with Yuma and Shun. So that's like we've got one spot really between Kazuki, Sota, and Kalmura. For the women, I feel really confident, obviously, with Kaori, mildly confident with Mona Chiba, and so it kind of leaves one space available for either Wakaba or one of these other ladies. I don't feel super good about Rinka. I would say Hana Yoshida or Amy Nakai probably has the best shot to make that Olympic team over the other ladies, in my opinion. I would love to see Reno have a really amazing year, but she just hasn't been, again, as consistent with some of those triples in both programs at enough events to really be able to propel herself. This could be the year, but I think I would put her behind those other two ladies in terms of potential to make the team. Let's talk about USA. Really, all four disciplines are going to be competitive. Let's talk about ice dance first, because going into the season, you felt like very, very firmly with Chalk and Bates and Carrera and Ponomarenko, and you felt like you're going to have a battle between Green and Parsons, Zingis and Kolesnik. Now we have the Shibutanis who have inserted themselves into that conversation, and we've really got three teams vying for one spot. Maybe it'll just be one team vying for that one spot if the Shibutanis come out and perform to what they were capable of doing 8 years ago. But we just don't know really what to expect at this point. And if you're Team USA, like, what do? Do you go with nostalgia almost, in a sense? They are Olympic medalists, right? Do you go with the future and you really want to have one of those young teams get some experience? Or do you feel like you're getting that enough with a team like Carrera and Ponomarenko, who are basically going to be the future, you would imagine, and you feel good with just them getting that experience? I think it's going to be super interesting. We know that typically there's not a lot of movement in ice dance, but when you have a team that kind of comes back, you kind of expect there to be a little bit of upward trajectory. And so if the Shibutanis come out and in this first Grand Prix, they're not medaling at that Grand Prix, does that mean that they can't move up as the season goes on? Of course, that doesn't mean that. Of course, we can see an upward trajectory with that kind of a team. But I think if you are Zingis and Kolesnik and Green and Parsons, you're not really afforded with that same luxury of kind of starting slow out of the gates and sort of rising as the season goes on. You've really got to come out of the gates really super strong and make the Shibutanis chase you if you're wanting to get that third spot. I think it's going to be tough, but we're going to get a preview of that in the Grand Prix, because Green and Parsons and the Shibutanis go head-to-head at NHK, and Zingis and Kolesnik and the Shibutanis go head-to-head at the Finland Grand Prix. So we're going to get some kind of an idea where these teams stack before we get out of this first half of the season. If we go on to pairs, we've got pretty strong feelings about Cam and O'Shea, and then a lot of question marks after that. The next best team, or even the team that's better than them right now, as being they're the national champions and they finished higher at Worlds, and that is Mitrofanoff and Alicia Efimova. They're not going to be eligible for the Olympics, barring some kind of miracle between now and December. So that leaves likely Plazas and Fernandez as a potential. They were out the entirety of last season with injury. Huge question mark. They were never a team that was very good at the side-by-side jump elements or even at the throws. Seen some of their practice footage that they've been posting on Instagram. Look consistent in practice, but what does that look like when they get to a competition is a completely different situation. We don't yet know who that team is going to be that's going to be trying to qualify that Olympic spot at the qualifying competition, but I'll talk about that in a second. So their potential. We've got the new team of Audrey Shin and Balazs Nash. They had a really great debut at U.S. Nationals, really, really poor showing at Four Continents. Had a lot of people question whether or not they should have gotten that spot or not. And so what do they look like kind of in this second year? They're going to be in the conversation just because by process of elimination, right? We have a new team, a surprising team of Chelsea Liu and Ryan Bedard, which was a surprising pairing to me because I thought Chelsea had retired when her and Balazs broke up. Maybe she did. Maybe she came back, or maybe she never did retire and was still looking for another partner. Either way it goes, she has another partner. Again, we've seen her with a lot of partners in the past. Ryan Bedard was previously paired with Isabel Martins, had a little bit of success here and there at a couple Grand Prix they were able to go to. And at U.S. Nationals, always felt like there was not enough of a height difference between those two. We'll see what they look like. I don't really expect them to be in the mix, but she is fabulous at the twist. She's fabulous at lifts. Obviously, the issue for her has been with the side-by-side jumps, and she's had a really, really long history of concussion. So it makes me nervous for her to be back. Pair skating, I'll throw their names out there, but I don't really expect them to be in the mix so much. And then we've got Emily Chen and Spencer Howe, who have shown us a lot of great promise early in this Olympic cycle, have been rather disappointing in the last couple of seasons, but they're certainly going to be in the mix to be in that qualifying competition. And I would be surprised at this point if they can come up with 3 teams, if they do qualify for that 3rd spot, to go to the Olympics and they're not on there. Got to feel pretty confident with them, along with Cam and O'Shea. And so really it's kind of who's going to get in there to get that 3rd spot. In the ladies to me, out of all of the disciplines, feels like the hardest for somebody to sort of upset the apple cart. You've got Alyssa Liu, who's the world champion. She's going, right? She also was the highest woman finisher at the Olympics 3 years ago. You've got Isabeau Labio, who has placed in the top 5 at every single world championships that she's gone to in this Olympic cycle. She has been incredibly consistent at the highest level. She's also a national champion. Cannot see a world where she is not on that team. And then you've got Amber Glenn, who to me of the 3 is the most in danger, even though she's the reigning 2-time national champion, just because at Worlds she hasn't had her best skates, whereas we have seen both Isabeau and Alyssa medal at Worlds, right? And so Amber's the only one of the 3 that doesn't have a medal at Worlds, even though she has a Grand Prix final title and even though she's the reigning U.S. champion. So all 3 of those, you're going to have to skate amazing if you are Brady Tennell or Sarah Everhart. Those are the 2 to me that have the most potential to knock them off. If you haven't heard, Lindsay Thorngren retired over the summer. We have no idea kind of what's going on with Ava Marie Ziegler. I think it would be very, very difficult for her with not competing at all last year to make the team. I think Elise Lynn Gracie, you could throw in kind of as a long shot. Obviously, she had a really great start to last season, could not really sustain those results. A lot of pressure on herself. Definitely had a tough time with the pressure going into competitions later in the season. Did end up with a medal at Junior Worlds later in the season, even though she didn't compete in juniors last season. Hopefully that gave her a little bit of confidence. I think next Olympic cycle is probably going to be where it's at for her. So for me, it's Sarah and it's Brady that are likely going to be the ones trying to push for one of those spots. Brady, to me, has the most potential just because Brady has scored in her career into the high 140s at many times. What has plagued her in this past season, really this whole Olympic cycle, have been under rotation calls. And so that could be the difference between her doing very well and making the Olympic team and not making the Olympic team. Is really was the difference for Alyssa. If you look at Alyssa at the beginning of last season, it was a lot of under rotation calls, especially in the free skate, that caused her not to be able to medal at a lot of the competitions that she was at once she hit the Grand Prix. And remember, both Brady and Sarah beat Alyssa at 4 continents last year in the lead up to Worlds. So if she could get, meaning Brady, those under rotations cleaned up, it could make a huge, huge difference for her. So there was a challenger event in the lead up to Worlds last year where Brady didn't get any under rotation calls. Was it a very lenient judging panel? Perhaps. And she scored like 147 points in that free skate. Shows you what she's capable of. And she was very, very close at times last season. She was really, at times it was spins that got her more than it was the jumps in those 2 Grand Prix that she was at. She was right in the mix for a medal. So she's definitely going to be somebody to contend with if she's healthy. And don't forget, she has been at the Olympics before and has medaled in the team event. before. So she does have that Olympic experience. And then you've got somebody like Sarah Everhart, who, in my opinion, the jumps are there. It's just the artistry that she's behind on the other ladies that was really what put her behind last season. How much has she been able to close that gap between last season and this season is really going to be the difference in whether or not she can make that Olympic team, because she was in the position as well to medal in a lot of the Grand Prix that she was at last season. If she can makes maybe even some technical changes on the combos that she chooses to do, for instance, could give her some extra points, in addition to hopefully a bigger bump in the PCF if she's really worked on that. So for me, those are kind of the two that I would be looking at in terms of the ladies. And then the men, oh my goodness. It felt like going into Worlds like we had the team. We know Jason's going to be on there. We know Ilya's going to be on there. There's zero question about those two men. The third one is the one that's interesting. And Andrew had such a fabulous season all last season into the short program at Worlds, had a really, really tough free skate at Worlds. It doesn't take him out, obviously. I think everyone else is still going to be chasing him. What does his competition look like this year? Obviously, you've got Maxim Noamov, who is coming off of just an incredibly emotional year for him losing his parents in Flight 5342. There's going to be a lot of people that are definitely going to be in his corner and rooting for him this season to really do well and make that Olympic team. There's Jacob Sanchez, who is in his first year of seniors. Could be a lot of pressure and a lot of new eyes on him coming into this season, but he could certainly be in the mix as well. The other person I'll throw in there is Jimmy Ma. He was so close to making it on that world team last season. He medaled at 4 continents. Looks like he really maybe turned a corner. But unfortunately for him, he started this season out already like we've seen from him so many times in the past. At Cranberry Cup, won the short program, was 11th in the free skate to finish 7th overall. And that's really sort of been the issue with Jimmy. It's either the short program or the free skate. It's very, very seldom been both programs doing well at the same time. It's not over for him after having a rough Cranberry Cup. It's August. We're not even in September, but he's going to have to show more consistency than we've ever seen from him in the past if he's going to make it onto that team. Really wouldn't put anybody else in the conversation that I have seen. Liam Kapekas or Tomoki Huatashi, just we have not seen the consistency or really even the potential in some cases yet of some of these other guys. And so in my opinion, this is going to be a battle between Torgashev, Noamov, Jacob Sanchez, and maybe Jimmy Ma for that third spot for the men. Canada is going to be interesting because you feel pretty good about Maddie Schizas. Can Catherine Medlin-Smith make some noise? Can Kaya Reuter at her new coaching change make some noise? Potentially. But most likely it's going to be Maddie Schizas. It's been her this entire Olympic cycle. She was a total rock star for Team Canada at the Olympics 3 years ago. And I really expect for it to be her again. But we'll see if anybody else can have some competition. The men's is going to be more interesting. Again, you've got to feel like mostly it's probably going to be Roman. Roman has been the most consistent, which isn't saying much, of all of the Canadian men and of all of the disciplines, of all of the competitors. Over the course of this podcast, I have definitely given the blues to the Canadian men the most. They have been by far and away the most frustrating. Here we are, first big challenger of the season. Cranberry Cup is not a big challenger, but it's bigger than like Philadelphia, right? Steven Gogolev has maybe the free skate of his life, and Roman Sadovsky comes from behind to win Cranberry Cup. So if this were a sign of things to come, I would be completely here for it, for sure. Alexa Rakic, you're in the conversation. Like Wesley Chu, you're in the conversation. Like all of these men are in the conversation because nobody has really set themselves apart enough but they're all going to be chasing Roman because he has the most potential that we have seen when he's on. And he's really one of the most brilliant artistic skaters in all of men's skating. He's skating to Claire de Lune for one of his pieces of music, and the free skate, I think it's going to be a really, really good vehicle for him. And his short program is a recycled program from him from the past. But it's still a little up in the air. For pairs, obviously, Deanne and Max, they're not going anywhere. Pereira and Michaud should also not be going anywhere either. But that third spot could definitely be up for grabs. Lauren and ETA, the last season, really have sort of established themselves. But is Benjamin Mamar and his new partner, Fiona, are they going to make some strides this year to sort of push them and maybe get ahead of that team? That remains to be seen. But I think of all the disciplines, pairs and women's probably feels the most set, I would say, at this point. But we'll see. And then in dance, you've definitely got the top two teams aren't going anywhere. Gilles Poirier, Joan Legas. But then that third team is going to be a battle between Laureat and Legas and Fabry and Air. Fabry and Air did themselves no favors, having a really weak world last year and barely making the free skate. And then Laureat and Legas didn't really do themselves any favors too much at Lake Placid by losing to the Browns. So I think this is going to be very competitive for both of these teams. With Laureat and Legas being the much older team, I would like to see them get the nod. I do think that they're the better team. They've just got to clean up some things. They've just had a lot of really big mistakes in the last couple of seasons that have just really, really hindered them. And I thought that they would have just a clear shot to Worlds last season after the whole Fonny Baudry Sorensen drama. But it just didn't happen for them last season, and they didn't make the world team. So here we are, this entire Olympic cycle, they haven't made the world team one time. And this is probably going to be their last season, I would imagine. I'm going to be rooting for them to make that Olympic team for sure. Team Korea, really we're talking about the women because there's only 2 spots. They've had 3 spots the last couple of years going into Worlds with really strong finishes at Worlds. Not the case in this past season. So you really got 4 people vying for 2 spots. And that's Chaeyeon Kim, Hyein Lee, Young Yu, who will be back, and Josh Shin, who is moving up from juniors. Josh Shin didn't have a great outing at Cranberry Cup. I'm not overly worried about it this early in the season. Didn't seem like she had the rotation at this point right now. She's capable of so much more. We really didn't see her at her best last year in juniors either. So I'm eager to see if she's able to find that form that she had a couple of years ago where she was really pushing Mao Shimada. If so, she would definitely make the Olympic team. But if she skates like she skated this past weekend, obviously that's not going to happen. What does Young Yu look like after an entire year off? She's got 2 Grand Prix assignments. She was at the Olympics 3 years ago, and she was in the top 6 at the Olympics. She was 4th in that free skate, actually beat Valieva in the free skate. The triple axel was working back then. And it's really when we've seen her at her best. I would love to see her return back to that form, or at least just consistency with triples. You know, the triple axel may not come back, but just to see her back in sort of a consistent way would be really, really great to see. So it should be a really interesting battle between those 4 ladies for those 2 spots if they're not completely done by the time the Olympics gets here, because we know that Korea is going to have them in a zillion domestic competitions. And then the last one I would say is Team Italy, because you've got obviously the women. Laura Naki Gutmann had a really fantastic year for her last season, but she hasn't done enough to secure that Olympic spot for just herself. Anna Pizzetta is going to be on her heels 100% this year, trying to fight for that spot. For the Italian men, they only have 2 spots. So you've got Matteo Rizzo, you've got Gabriele Frangipani, you've got Nicola Mimola, and you've got Daniel Grassel. So 4 guys vying for 2 spots. I would say Frangipani is definitely on the outside looking in for the other 3. Nicola Mimola medaled at Europeans. Mateo has also medaled at Europeans in the past. And then Daniel Grassel has very high tech content. So it's going to be, I think, again, a really, really competitive season for these guys to try to get those home spots at an home Olympics, which is only going to happen, this time in their career. I'm definitely rooting for Mateo for sure. And if Mimola skates like he did last year, he'll be tough to beat out as well. But I definitely don't want to see a team without Mateo on it. Okay. And then for the ice dance, that's really going to come down to if they can qualify a second spot or not. Obviously, Grenade and Fabry are going to be there, but they're going to be one of the teams vying for a spot at the Olympic qualifying competition. And then going into the pairs, obviously Conti and Mashi coming off of their season, feel really, really good about them. Gilardi and Ambrosini had a really tough season last year. Are Bakari and Garizi back? Are they healthy? What does that look like? Can they find that form that they found to win Europeans a couple years ago? Could be competitive for that second spot for the Italian pairs, or it could not be. That sort of remains to be seen. Okay, spent a lot of time on that, more than I had expected. Let's talk about this Olympic qualifying event, which is going to be a huge storyline. And it's really just a little over a month away, September 17th to the 21st in China. So there are 5 spots available for the men and the women, and then 3 spots available for pairs and dance. So for the men, you've got South Korea, Kazakhstan, Georgia, and France who can all qualify a second spot. I don't think you feel particularly great about any of those except for maybe France. Obviously, they've got the 2 spots already from Kevin and Adam, but they could potentially get a 3rd spot. You've got Luke Economides or you've got Francois Batot. Neither one of them have a huge technical base. I don't feel super confident about either one of those, but of the 4, I would probably put my most confidence in them. Maybe Sion Lee, if he were the representative for Korea, also incredibly inconsistent, but could do it. Who you would expect in the men's, Peter Gumenik is going to be the Russian representative. I have paid zero attention to Russia in these past 3 years, and I know less about their men than I do any of the other disciplines at this point. I don't really know where he's at. I can only imagine that he's probably going to be stronger than, Donovan Carrillo and some of the other competitors, Nikita Starotzin, that are going to be trying to qualify for one of these 5 spots. But the men, for me, out of all of the disciplines, feels the most up in the air. We go to the women, we've got both Belgium and Estonia who are going to be qualifying for a potential second spot. Obviously, Belgium with Luna, you expect to qualify. You expect Adelia Petrosian of Russia to claim a spot. You expect for Anastasia Gubanova, who had a nightmare short program at Worlds, to claim a spot. That's 3 spots right there, and it just leaves 2 for every other country, China, you name it, that's going to be trying to qualify another spot. So that's going to be really, really competitive for ladies, and it's going to be tough for someone like Josephine Talagard or ladies that have a hard time just getting tech minimums for Worlds to get one of those top 5 spots. And then in pairs, you've got US, Japan, Georgia, Hungary, Australia, and Uzbekistan. You got 6 different countries that could all send a team to get a second spot, and there's only 3 spots available. Not aware of another team for Hungary, Australia, Uzbekistan, or Georgia at this point. So really you're sort of looking at US and Japan. An interesting note here, if you weren't already aware, is that Russia's 2 entrants in both the pairs and the dance were rejected. They have appealed it. I don't think that's going to be appealed. And so the team that they had submitted was Mishina and Galyamov, who are the reigning Olympic bronze medalists and world champions from the 2021 Worlds. And because of their presence in some of those pro-war rallies, and so it was going to be extremely difficult for any of those competitors to to be selected. And I'm really, really glad that the ISU, just if it was the ISU that made the decision, perhaps it was somebody else, but I'm glad that they rejected it, because it especially Stepanova and Buchan for dance just made absolutely no sense that they would be selected. So that opens up another spot. So you feel pretty good about a U.S. team, whether it's McBeath and Parkman or Shin and Naj or Plazas and Fernandez. I think at this point it's probably going to be Chan and Howe would be my guess. I think they're probably the most consistent out of a lot of inconsistent teams, but they're probably going to make that decision this week at Champs Camp, who that's going to be. I expect it to be either Chan and Howe or McBeath and Parkman that are going to be trying to get that spot. Likely McBeath and Parkman, from what we understand, would not be eligible to be at the Olympics, but they can still go and compete for that spot. Japan, it's going to be Nagioka and Moriguchi, who competed at Worlds, did not make the free skate. They have all the potential in the world to be able to do it if they skate up to really even maybe just competent to based upon some of the other competitors that are going to be there. You know, a team like the Kovalevs, who would love to qualify and sort of make that full Olympic team for the team event, are going to have to skate, in my mind, really, really well, better than what we typically see for them to get it. And then in dance, you've got Italy, who's going to be trying to qualify a second spot. It's going to be difficult for them. They had another team at Worlds, and that was Bonnie and Roethlisberger, who competed at Worlds but did not make the free skate. But there's been also a lot of thought that Italy would instead send the junior team that's moving up to seniors of Tali and Lafanara. I don't know what's the right call. You don't have any senior competition to sort of go on with Tali and Lafanara. You'd have lots of senior competitions, obviously, for Manny and Roethlisberger. So they could go either way. And it's going to be tough because in dance, you've got Reed and Amber Levicius, who are absolutely going to get one of those spots. You've got Harris and Chan, who are going to be there trying to get a spot, who also feel like they're going to finish stronger than these other teams. Not aware of a second team for Georgia, who could send a team to qualify a second spot. But that is happening in, like I said, just a little over a month, and we'll have answers to these questions. The other two storylines that I'll just briefly touch up on, the returnees. Obviously, I talked about this in the Grand Prix assignments episode, and that is the Shibutanis coming back and the new team of Juana Beaudry and Cizeron, and throwing a wrench into ice dance, which tends to be very unexciting, really. In an Olympic season, it's usually kind of the status quo a lot of times. Could this be something similar to going into the 2010 Olympics, where we had a team like Virtue and Moyer go and win the Olympics, having not won a world championship leading up to it, which you don't see happen? You had a team like Davis and White, who were just missed the podium at the previous Worlds, go and get the silver medal and really handily at that next year. And you had the team of Dominina and Chabalin really fall off after winning Worlds. So are you going to have a crazy season kind of like that? Or are you going to have a season more like we're kind of used to, where the Olympic podium basically ends up being the top three that we saw in the previous Olympic season? So these two are teams, especially probably Forno, Beaudry, and Cizeron, more than the Shibutanis, are going to be a team that might upset the balance, and we will see. I know that there was a little bit of footage of Forno, Beaudry, and Cizeron at some kind of a exhibition that they did early in the summer, and people were not particularly impressed. I chose not to watch it and just wait until they're a little bit more polished. And then the last storyline is really the new kids on the block, those people moving up for juniors, and what is their impact going to be in the seniors. And I specifically isolated Joshin of Korea just because we knew that this was going to be the season that she was going to make it into seniors. And the way that she looked in those first couple of years of juniors in this Olympic cycle, it was like, girlfriend might medal at the Olympics. Again, not her best season last year, not her best start to this season. So what does that look like? Amy Nakai, amazing last year in juniors. Again, she's in the shadow sort of Mai Shimada, and just the amazing depth that they have in Japanese women, especially in Japanese women's juniors, is incredible. But with a very consistent, at times, triple axel, could easily interject herself into conversations for medals at Grand Prix at the senior level. And then Jacob Sanchez, who I mentioned earlier as being someone, because of the incredible consistency we've had with the men for the U.S., could put himself in that conversation. And I put Tali and Lafenard in here, not because I expect them to medal at Grand Prix, but if they were able to qualify a spot for Italy, or if Monty and Roethlisberger were able to qualify a spot, is it now going to be a competition between those two teams to see who would make the Olympic team? So it puts them in a little bit different position coming into this season than for your typical junior teams. So there's going to be some people to look for, especially if you don't watch a lot of juniors and you haven't seen some of these. They're very, very strong competitors and definitely ready for seniors. All right. So those are my top storylines going into this season. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. Got a lot more content coming at you the rest of this month. And before you know it, it'll be time to get into the real heavy challenger part of this season. I was super surprised that we even had a stream for Cranberry Cup. Fingers crossed that we might have a stream for the John Nix Classic, which would be super awesome. It was weird, which is one of the reasons I didn't recap Cranberry Cup, because I missed the short programs, and they put the short programs up on YouTube. However, they didn't put them up to their original music. It was just random music. And so I'm like, I can't even critique these programs because it's not to the music that they're supposed to be using. It was just kind of weird, but I'm not complaining. We got a stream. Amazing. Hope they keep it up, because again, any eyes that they can get on this sport is positive, especially in an Olympic season. So you can find me on all the socials at Ice Skate Podcast. You can send me a line at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. Feel free to send me a line or leave a comment about what storylines you're looking forward to the most this season. What competitions internally are you looking for in some of these countries to see who makes the Olympic team? Who are you rooting for? Love interacting with you guys, and it's good to be back. Hope you have a great rest of your week.